Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of our listeners all across the world. I'm Barry Mellalieu, your host of the RevAmp podcast. Today I have Jamie, the CRO of UserZoom, a platform that helps enterprises and mid companies create better digital experiences. They have over 1,000 customers, and according to a recent podcast by Nathan Laka, they have $80 million in run rate. Jamie, I want you to take it away. Tell me a bit more about yourself, anything that I missed there.
All right, thank you, Barry. So Jamie Mellalieu, CRO of UserZoom, as you've said. Our run rate's actually quite a bit higher than that now, which is good, and hopefully more again this year. I think you covered it.
All right, perfect.
I was just going to say we're just trying to help our customers improve their UX and their UX practices.
I love that. It's super interesting topic, and definitely, I'm sure, very relevant during the COVID pandemic when people have even gone more online. So I think we're going to talk about two topics, and then we'll see where it goes from here. One, I really want to focus on your career development to become CRO for the first part of the podcast, and then for our listeners to know, we'll also talk about acquisitions. I know UserZoom is pretty active acquiring companies, and I think that will be very interesting for this podcast. So the first part is I'm just grabbing your LinkedIn right here. So I'm only going to look at UserZoom. I know that you obviously worked beforehand, but UserZoom, you've been there for 8 years and 2 months. So you started there in 2013, late 2013, as the European Business Development Manager. Then you became the Sales Director of the UK. Then relatively shortly after, the VP of Sales in EMEA. And then for the past 4 years, nearly 4 years, you have been the CRO of UserZoom. Tell us and tell the audience about that. If they want to become a CRO, what needs to happen? Tell us even how's the past 8 years been?
how it all came about, yeah. So in one form or another, I've actually managed sales teams for 22 years actually. So half my life, and so I was in a sales leadership position before I joined UserZoom. I was talking to UserZoom, and they said, "Look, we know we need a good sales leader, but we just don't have the size in the UK right now. But if you can help us build out Europe and crack a few verticals and a few other things besides territories and stuff, then you can become the sales leader and start to grow other things." So we did that, and in that first year, I'd not carried a bag for a long time, so I had to remember what all that was about. But I'm pleased to say we achieved all that we set out to achieve. We got into the banking sectors and the retail sectors and Sweden and all the territories that we set out to go and accomplish. And so I guess they believe me that I may have known a couple of things about what I said I knew about selling and stuff. And so I became in charge of the UK team, and we started to grow that out. And it was going great. And then we actually as a company, we did our first Series A. So up until that point, we've been completely bootstrapped. And when we got our Series A through Sunstone Partners, they were called Trident back then, we had an American company, a UK company, a German company, and a Spanish company. UserZoom was originally founded out of Spain. And so they said, "Look, that kind of complicated structure doesn't work for us. We want Europe and America." So they asked me if I would run Europe from a sales perspective. So very quickly we had to, get the German company, the Spanish company, and the UK company all kind of pulling in the same direction, doing the same things in the same way, which was really my first taste of international management. I'd never managed teams outside of the UK before. Which was super exciting, and I learned a lot, and made a lot of flights and a lot of mistakes, no doubt. But we did what we could, and we got Europe really starting to fire after the first couple of quarters. It started to go really, really well. And then I was happy running Europe. We were growing the thing really, really well, and then the company decided to change their structure a little bit. So sales and what was customer success had different reporting lines. and they decided that they wanted to unify the role, and a few people have put my name in the frame. So I contacted the CEOs and said, look, I know you've heard from other people that maybe I should, I'd be a good candidate, and here I am, and I'm interested, and you want me to keep running Europe, that's fine, and I'll keep doing that, but I'm interested. And yeah, they gave me a shot, and out the gate we were able to really ramp growth and hit all the numbers, and we went on an amazing run. So 4 years later, looking significantly older, I'm still a CRO.
That's great. I thought it was also interesting. It seems like that there were only just it wasn't just about hitting numbers, but it was also about sometimes a little luck. Company structure. The VC wanted not just four offices but 2 offices, and obviously in order to get promoted you need to be doing a good job. So well worth it, seemingly.
I mean, you know what, I've never been the kind of person that I've got the next role planned. I know some people are like that, and all power to them, but when I was UK sales director, I didn't think, oh well, when we do a Series A there'll be this role and I'll go for it, right? I was asked, and I was in control of any of that, and then I was happily running Europe, and then they took that decision, and I was nominated and then asked. I wasn't VP of EMEA plotting how to become a CRO. I've never really done that. I've always believed in concentrate on the job that I've got, try and do it to the best of my abilities, and if I do that, I'll be happy. And I guess what comes with that then is people start putting your name in the frame for other roles and other things, but I've never done it for that, really.
Love that. I think that's good. You didn't present that as advice, but I think that's good advice for the listeners at home. So as CRO right now for the past 4 years, or what's your day-to-day? What percentage of your time do you focus on sales? What percentage do you focus, I guess, on customer success? What do you also do? Acquisitions, marketing? What falls under the CRO today?
Well, I mean, it's evolving all the time. So my first year as a CRO, I was trying to build a management team that managed the way I wanted to lead our people, which was based around values and longer term thinking, and whole ream of stuff. There's a fair few LinkedIn videos of me talking about things like Kaizen and teamwork and all that. And so really it was about helping them and supporting them and making sure that we were a cohesive unit. So it was nearly all sales that year, one way or another. Got involved in some deals. We built some new teams to focus on particular segments of our customers, and so I was very hands-on with some of those sales guys, because we needed a new approach and we didn't have one. So it was, I was in the weeds, writing decks and all kinds of stuff. And then as we grow, as we've grown in, I think the year prior to me being the CRO, I think we were doing about 19-20 million, something like that. And I think hopefully this year we'll go straight through 100. So it's just a very, very different job now. So one thing is I'm managing oftentimes managers of managers on, maybe some layers below that. I've had marketing under my remit for 2 years. I'm not, by no stretch of the imagination, I'm the world's best marketeer, but it made sense for the company at that time. But now we're at a size where we need to kind of really, up level the sophistication of our marketing. And we've recently just appointed Sophie Chester, who was the CMO at Mellalieu, as our CMO, and she's 10x, more even the marketing leader I'll ever be. And so you've not got to be I think too precious and too territorial, right? Like, but all right, I'd probably feel territorial if they tried to take sales off me, but it evolves all the time. These days, a good 20%, maybe a little more of my time is spent working and liaising with like business partners, right? So I have a people business partner, and she and I talk a lot about, anything like how we're going to up level the team, or how do we think about X person or Y person, or all the things that come with people challenges. I have a finance business partner, right? So we just finished 2021, there was a whole bunch of budgeting to get done and arguments about who and what and when and why and how much, and and that goes on, right? Because day-to-day needs occur. People come to me, they have an ask. It's maybe in the budget, it maybe isn't. So that a good proportion of my time now is that way orientated. And once you get to C-level, you're in a different team, right? Yes, I'm in the sales team, but I'm also in the executive leadership team. There's almost, it's not two jobs, but that again is a huge chunk of time, right? If we're going to be successful as a company, I need to make sure that me and the COO are aligned, and if there's a disagreement on a thing, that it's at least a decent discussion and we figure it out. That you've got to invest in those relationships like any other, and invest in the decisions that you've got to take. Likewise, the SVP of product, he and I talk a lot about where the product needs to go and where, what the update is and how do we think about that and how's that going to affect pricing, so that's a big chunk of it as well. And then, lastly, you've got to reserve a portion of your day or a week for your people. Like, I don't know what's necessarily going on unless they pick up the phone or, get on a Zoom and we talk about it. And so you've just got to try and be accessible as well. There's no point in me being in meetings with accountants all day or meetings with X&T1 all day if I'm not ultimately there for my people. So it's kind of a huge mishmash.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say you mentioned at the beginning, you're a CRO, you're in the weeds, now you're more in management. At what recurring revenue did that change? Was it a year thing? Was it a time thing? Or was it a revenue thing?
Yeah, good questions all. I think some of those go hand in hand. So, we were writing a pitch deck. I didn't deliver the pitch deck, the salesperson did, and I wrote it with their VP. But once those things were kind of established, there wasn't necessarily the need for me to, be as involved in that, right? And the trick of being a half good CRO, I think, is that, like, what should I be spending my time on now? Like, where are the challenges? What bits do I need to trust that leader's got it, or we've ticked that box, or whatever. So I guess it's a gradual evolution, and it depends on where I felt we really needed to lean in. So out the gate, in that first year, customer success came under me, and I remember the conversation. I was like, okay, what's our gross renewal rate going to be, for example? What's this KPI going to be? And the response wasn't a number. It was, well, what would you like it to be? And I was like, what? And they said, well, the way we've done it in the past is we've just said the number that the leaders wanted to present to the management team. And I was like, oh, okay, right. We have a whole cultural reboot to do in this organization, right? So we just had to spend a lot of time talking about, look, you're going to have to learn how to forecast, right? If we can forecast what 300 prospects are going to do that we don't really know, surely we can forecast what 300 people we've got contracts and relationships with are going to do. And just because I've said it doesn't mean today the answer is, oh yeah, of course, right? But we'll work together on it. And I've always tried to work a person to person level first. They've got to trust me, right? It's all very well and good me saying, look, come up with a forecast. And if we miss it, we miss it. But I want you to try, right? But if the first time they miss their forecast, all I do is phone them up and light them up, they're never going to trust you again, and they're not going to, the forecast's always going to be tricky. So we worked on that together about how we might approach it, and it's just been a gradual year-over-year thing. And the more that's worked, and the better that's gone, and the more sophisticated we've become, the less I've needed to be involved.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think in the podcast it mentioned that you guys have 120% by Nathan Recka, that you guys have 120% NDR, which is pretty positive.
Right. Yeah.
So that's fantastic. I think we could talk more about CRO, but I really want to talk about acquisitions because I think that's unique. UserZoom's acquired 4 companies. Right before this conversation, you mentioned that you were involved with 3 of those 4.
Yep.
Maybe you could talk about why is the company acquiring companies?
Yep.
What kind of companies those are, and your involvement as CRO in that process.
Yeah. So of the 3, so the first of the 3 was actually a UK acquisition, and we felt that we had a gap in our product offering that they could fill. And then on top of that, there's two other reasons. One is it's a competitor in a market that becomes a bit of thorn in each side, right? Because their price point was quite low, and that wasn't helping. Actually, wasn't helping them. That's ultimately why they got acquired, and it certainly wasn't helping us. And I don't think it was actually helping the customers either. You know, they'll always go for a cheap price. I get that, but it meant that they weren't necessarily getting the services and the care and attention perhaps that they need, right? So, but then there's always an element. If you're in a niche space or a space which is, you know, fairly specialized, you know, it's not. Well, Zoom's a good example, right? You pretty much everybody know. You know, you don't need a degree to work a Zoom call, right? Whereas, you know, UX design, UX research, you know, they're all quite like in-depth disciplines, certainly these days. And so when you're in a space like ours, there's always an opportunity to treat it as an acqui-hire, right? So not only are you picking up, in some cases, tech, or in some cases revenue, or hopefully both, but you're also picking up people that will hopefully stay and, you know, become productive, successful members of our team. And so the founder of that first acquisition still to this day works at UserZoom and leads our education arm and our research partner arm in Europe. And yeah, so that was the first one, and kind of why we did that. The second one again was we felt that we needed to strengthen our moderated offering, which is a research method, of which I won't go into too much detail, but and so we were like, well, we could build it. That's always an option, right? But as ever, the product roster was pretty full. And we decided to, okay, well, what's the best moderated solution on the planet? And it was the second acquisition. So we sat down with them, and, you know, we've always talked, every acquisition I've been involved in, I talk first about how we work, what our culture is, because I think that's important to the people that are thinking about selling. You know, they don't want to, in my experience anyway, they don't just want to sell and, you know, walk away. They care about the people that work there. They care about the legacy of however many years they've been working on that thing. And so, you know, we always, well, I personally always start there. I'm also not the money guy, so, you know, I wouldn't necessarily talk about that. But so we, me and one of my VPs flew to New York and sat down with them. You know, we talked a little bit, and, you know, of course, a lot of the transactional side of it was led by the investors. And we just said, look, here's how we work, here's how we sell. We just, you know, it's a, you know, cheesy phrase, but we open the kimono, like, look, you know, we'll just tell you how we approach it and how we see the market and where we think it's going and why you guys would be good. And, you know, we weren't the only show in town for them. I think they had a few interested parties, but you'd have to ask the founders. But I think one of the reasons we were successful was, I think they got that we understood it and that we saw the future together, and it wasn't like a, you know, like a bullying thing or a, you know, which I think some acquisitions can kind of be, and, you know, or it wasn't a, we cared about the future that they also cared about, I guess is the best way to put that. And so that's worked really, really well. And then the last acquisition was kind of quick, actually. Much smaller company in tech that's in a related but not the same space. And we felt that it completely complemented what we want to be for our customers and what we think our customers need, and what they've also told us that they need. And so that acquisition went pretty quickly. They didn't have a sales team in that particular company, so that's kind of new because the previous two did. But in the last 7 months, we've tripled the size of that business already. So hopefully we'll be able to do that again and again and again.
Cool. And then maybe can you tell us more of your involvement? And is this the involvement of every CRO or the involvement of Jamie as a CRO?
Yeah, I could only speak to my own experience. I'm sure there are acquisitions that get done without the CRO being involved. Maybe they just get told one day, hey, we bought this company, go figure it out, or go sell some of it or whatever. My involvement, so the first one was actually a British company. And so just out of sheer, just pragmatic, Jamie's in England and and most of the other executive team aren't. Like I said, we met for lunch initially, and started to just talk about, again, same approach, right? The company, how we work, why we work. What would it look like if they were together? I think there's a degree of kind of translating what Americans meant by what they said and what the English meant by what they said, because that's not always the same thing, right?
That's for a different podcast.
Very much so, yeah. But things like multiples based on growth rate isn't, or at least at the time, wasn't necessarily as well known, and so I think there was two roles really. One was just to kind of try to get on with him and try and explain what we saw the combined future being, and the second one was to try and help them navigate some of that cultural difference, perhaps. So we met a whole bunch of times right the way through the acquisition. Eventually met initially the founders tend to want to just keep it between themselves. That case there's two of them, because they don't want to freak anybody out, and they know it may not go anywhere. But at some point, they then bring into the fold, either their senior leadership or sometimes everybody. And so again, that's like the second date, really, even if the first date's probably a series of dates, because they've just been told that, hey, we may be doing this thing, because it must be real enough for them to be told. And of course, they've got their own questions and fears and worries. And as I've said, I've always just tried to take the human approach, really, rather than the deal approach, if you like. And it's paid off. Yeah,
absolutely. So then let's talk about that human approach. After the acquisition, what's the human approach to help onboard them, not only for them to feel comfortable at your company, but also for them to sell the products that you guys are already selling?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you can't expect too much too soon, right? And on the one hand, you've got investors that have probably paid a decent chunk of change for the acquisition, and they want a return as quickly as they absolutely can get a return, right? That makes total sense. And you as a CRO have to act, or my experience, you have to act as the buffer. So on the one hand, you have this pressure to get a return and get a return really, really quickly. And on the other hand, you might, for you anyway, you can't put that pressure on them, because it'll just freak them out, right? It's hard enough starting a new job, let alone one that you've never applied for, right? Like all of a sudden, like, oh, I used to go to work and it used to be called this, and now I'm going to work and it's called that. And actually, that first acquisition, we moved everybody into a brand new office the day it all got announced and launched. So a bit like a play date, the kids were kind of forced together, and like, you will play together. And so you just kind of got to accept that, there's an aim and there's a goal, and there's quite often a target associated with those things. But day one out the gate, just try to earn a little grace and favor. I think even trust's probably a little too much to ask for straight away. Everyone's cautiously optimistic, but I'm sure everybody goes home those first few days going, right, this is just new, right, and weird. And what did that person mean in that meeting when they said this, and what did they mean? So you've got to be present and available for them. Spend time down there, and just not necessarily any real goal necessarily. Sometimes I would, in that particular case, I would just be in the office and make sure I grabbed a few people for a cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. And then over a period of time, I would then involve them in my thinking and my planning, because you want them to feel like it's not imposed on them. It's they've had a say and they've had a thing, or at the worst case, they at least understand why the plan is the plan. So that first company had a very, very different sales culture. So overnight, I tripled their targets. I didn't tell them that straight away, but I knew that's what we needed to do to make the thing successful. So when I did tell them, I literally went through all the numbers. I went, look, this is the money, this is the target, this is what we need. We can't hire. It's got to come from you two, but this is how I think we can do it. And I remember the two guys that were involved, was just like, there's just no way. Because they were, they've been killing themselves to get, to X, and now I'm asking for 3X. And actually that year we blew the target out of the water. And so, and they I think they realized that actually if you can make a revenue machine, you trust in that machine. And That was a journey they went on, and that was that first year. So that first year for them was sell more of the product you've currently got, and I'm fine with that. And we figured out a way to get that done, and then we transitioned them into UserZoom. Of those two people, one of them didn't like the role we wanted to transition them into, but it was the only role that we had. And so we shook hands and parted as, buddies, and the other person loved the role that we presented them, and to this day is one of the most successful people in Europe in sales. And so you've got to understand that there's just as much an individual journey as there is a company journey and a culture journey.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. I think it's also interesting that if I understood correctly, correct me if I'm wrong. So after you acquire them, they still only sold their product for at least
for that first
6
year,
months or even a whole year.
Yeah.
So they're in the same office, but it's a bit siloed in the product offering. And then I guess, was that so that you could train them, or just to make them feel more comfortable? Is that
it's everything, right? It's there's on balance, you've got to look at it, and it's like I said, there's the pressure to get a return,
right?
So if you're not going to be in direct competition, and you can get a return quicker sometimes by just selling what they currently sell. Also, you've got things like contractual obligations. You've got pipeline that's already out there. There's quotes that have already been made. You can only do so much so quickly. And so I think we just took the decision, look, let's hit the financial targets that we need to hit, take the pressure off the product journey, and then over a course of the year, we'll start ramping their training on the other stuff, and they'll attend meetings and they'll start to see it, because sometimes they need to know that it's possible. You got to remember that they didn't sit a job interview and weigh up, do I not want to work for this company? They got told, you've just been bought and now you work for this company. So they have to go back, I think, before they can take a step forward. And so, but I think by the end of that year, well, I remember one of the guys, we were at lunch and he said, I'm a convert, I get it. Like, I really like it. I'm enjoying it. And, you've got to do things like team nights out and, all that stuff to make them feel included. But you're right. If they sell a different product for a period of time and nobody else sells that product, there is a little bit of a difference. And so you've just got to accept that it's maybe a little weird for a while, but it will come together.
Absolutely.
And that's that time around. I wasn't able to say to him, listen, don't worry, I've been through this before. Here's how it's going to go. But in subsequent acquisitions, I've been able to say to him, look, I'm telling you now, this is how it's going to go. This is how you're going to feel at these points. Don't worry, we'll get through it.
Cool. Love that. What's the number one mistake you made during acquisitions? It could be not necessarily the companies you bought, but the companies you didn't buy. It could be with anything.
Wow.
Top three. One of the top three.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest mistakes I made was once you've done it once and well, you assume the exact same approach is going to work the second time around. And so we designed an approach, and it wasn't. I don't think it was necessarily the right approach. I think kind of almost connected to that is you've got to do as much learning as they do. And I think initially sometimes it's easy to get carried away with the fact that you've done the acquisition, you've got the plan, you've got the finance thing. I think the more we've lent into learning those businesses and the spaces, so the second acquisition, completely different part of the market. UserZoom was exclusively enterprise since our inception, and the company that we acquired was very much in the corporate space, and it's different. Deal values, transactions, process, just the whole go-to-market motion is a bit different. And I think it's a minor mistake, but it can have big ramifications. I remember coming off a call once, and it was me and the enterprise leaders talking, but it was the corporate leadership was on the call. And I asked about a deal. So how's that deal going? And they're like, well, it's okay, it's not bad, but don't worry, it's a small deal. And they were a bit derogatory about the size of the deal, and that deal was bigger than anything that they were selling. And we ran through it, and it was only when I got off the call, I was like, oh, that was just clumsy. That wasn't smart at all. And so I rang the leader and said, look, apologize. And, it's not, it's habit. our deals, our mindsets are set to deals of this size and higher. That doesn't mean that we don't value what you're doing, but otherwise we wouldn't have acquired you. Just got to give us as much grace as we're trying to give you, right? And so I think that's always tricky. And then another mistake, I don't know. I think it's not a mistake as much, but I think you've got to be cognizant of it, which is when you're the acquiring company and you acquire them, my mind naturally goes to the people who were just acquired as part of that transaction and how they think and feel. But it can also have a ripple effect to the rest of the people as part of the, where the acquiring company. And I think maybe I've undermanaged that in the past. I think you've got to overly explain again and again and again and again to everybody, actually, but just as important to your existing employees, why you're doing what you're doing. Because if you acquire tech, I'm not saying it was, but it could be perceived from, I don't know, engineering. Well, is that a lack of faith in us because they chose not to, ask us to build it, right? Or and that's absolutely not the case. It's usually just about acceleration and speed and opportunity, all the rest of it. But so there's just a lot. Acquisitions are hard work, particularly if there's technical integration involved. Humans are complex emotional beings. That's not easy either. And then you add in the last 2 years as well, a global pandemic. And so you're doing a lot of this stuff remotely. I've never met any of the employees of our last acquisition face to face, which is tricky, right? Because you're trying to, I've talked a lot about trust and, friendship and, opening up and helping them think through that. Well, that's hard to do if you only ever see me 2D on a screen. It's just so much easier over lunch or coffee or in a bar or whatever. So
that's what Mark Zuckerberg's trying to fix, right? With Meta.
With Meta, yeah. I don't know if he's got B2B enterprise acquisitions in mind when he's doing it, but yeah, maybe it'll work.
Maybe. What's your favorite part about being a CRO?
Good question. What is my favorite? You know what? It's the variety. It's the variety. The challenge. If you're growing like we're growing, the challenge is different every year. Every year, at least. The company, you kind of have to reinvent yourselves every 12 months. Certainly, go-to-market approach. And I get a lot of satisfaction from my management team and seeing them grow and succeed and thrive. And likewise, as a team, we're all really close. And I'd like to think we've fostered a really good culture. So I would say that I'm competitive, right? And winning's good, right? And so I think if you're a CRO, your life's very much defined by, hey, here's the line, you get over that and everything's good, right? And that's always nice as well. But over and above everything, I would absolutely put the people in the team first and the variety.
Cool, love that. What's your favorite book for business or for leisure?
Favorite book? So I practice what's come to be known as Japanese philosophy, right, which is Kaizen. I talk a lot about it to my people. I think it's a great way of connecting big goals to small changes that you can make that lead to uplifts in performance. I think it helps people manage their emotions. And there's a book called The Spirit of Kaizen that's only a tiny little thing. It's not particularly weighty. But I think that's a great book to read if that at all interests you. In fact, I think the last chapter actually, it gives a lot of examples in sales, and certainly explains how I try to think about things and approach things. And then there's all the usual stuff, right? So, predictable revenue is a good one, from impossible to inevitable. There's, Anthony and Areno's done lots of good stuff. Eat That Lunch. There's, I think you've got to, as a CRO, read the blog post and take a little time to read the odd book here and there, because there's just no way you're going to figure it all out yourself. So don't even try. I think just read widely if you can. And I'm actually not a big reader, but I've certainly read all the things I've just mentioned over the years. And I think what you're looking to do is take away 2 or 3 good ideas from every book. And if you can do that and you can implement them in some way, shape or form, then I think it helps.
Absolutely. That Kaizen thing, I've heard about it, and now it's going to go to the top of my list. So I appreciate that. So thank you so much, Jamie, for coming on. I really appreciate it, especially during such crazy sales time, Q1. We really appreciate it. It was really fun to learn about your CRO journey, about your view on acquisitions, and everything else. So thanks again for coming on the RevAmp podcast, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much.